For a moment, imagine being the most powerful sports fan in the world. For decades, you have attended the Olympic Games, the World Championships, any major tournament, with the absolute certainty that your country would take home the gold. It wasn't hope, it was a statistic. It was China and table tennis. For generations, table tennis was synonymous with Chinese dominance. But what happens when that certainty begins to wobble? In the last 18 months, something has shifted in the global landscape of this sport. It is no longer just about a European or Japanese rival winning a match every now and then. We are witnessing a historic phenomenon. The Chinese armor is showing cracks. From the defeats in Doha at the beginning of the year, to the recent shock at the WTT champions in Chongqing, the headlines in the Chinese press are no longer about overwhelming victories, but about alarm and decline. But is China really losing its dominance? Or are we simply witnessing a generational transition? A bump in the road for an unstoppable giant? Today, in this one video, we are going to dissect every angle of this question. We will analyze the recent results that have set off the alarms, from the debacle in Doha to the earthquake in Singapore. We will talk about the names that are threatening the throne. The Brazilian, Hugo Calderano, the French phenomena, Belak Tabran, and the young Japanese army. We will also hear from the protagonists, the Chinese leaders who admit their weaknesses, and the analysts who believe this change might actually be the best thing that has ever happened to table tennis. Get ready for a journey through history, statistics, and strategy, because what is happening on the green tables is not just sport, it is the chronicle of a changing era. And understand the magnitude of the crisis. We must first understand the magnitude of the legend, to be precise. Since table tennis entered the Olympic program in Seoul in 1988, China has won 37 of the 42 gold medals available. That is an impressive 90% of all gold medals. In women's singles, Chinese players have not conceded a single gold medal since that date. In men's singles, they have only lost on 2 occasions. In 2004, in Athens, and, interestingly, in 2020, one in Tokyo. But throughout all this time, the feeling of dominance was total. This dominance was not a coincidence. It was built on a ruthless pyramidal system, a national academy in Beijing that functions like a talent factory, technique refined to the millimeter, and a depth of bench that no other country could even dream of. When a champion like Malong retired, there were already 2 or 3 young players waiting to take his place. Names like Fan Zhendong, Wang Chuqin, or Sun Yingxia were not just players. They were the next piece in an assembly line of legends. This technical superiority leads Steve Dainton, the chief executive officer of the International Table Tennis Federation, to make an honest reflection a few years ago. He himself described the situation as something that has lived with us for quite some time. And he added that China is so technically advanced that most of the world does not have that knowledge. For years, the rest of the world could only aspire to be the rival that, every once in a while, managed to snatch a semi-final. But something has started to creak in the perfect machinery, and the first symptoms did not arrive with just any defeat, but with a hemorrhage of titles at the beginning of this year. If we had to pinpoint the exact moment the alarm went off in Beijing, it would be January of 2026. The scene, Doha, Qatar. 2 consecutive tournaments, the WTT champions Doha and the WTT star contender Doha. The expectation was the usual. China was there to take most of the 7 titles on offer. But what happened was described by the Chinese media outlet 163 as something incredible and predictable. China lost 6 of those 7 championships. But let's break this down because the numbers are chilling for a Chinese fan. In the WTT champions Doha, which is the higher tier tournament of the 2, no Chinese player reached the final. Not one. In the men's category, the title went to Taiwan's Lin Yunru, who defeated South Korea's Zhang Wujin in the final. In the women's category, the victory went to Zhu Yuling, who at 31 years old, won an all-Chinese final against Chen Xingtong, although Zhu Yuling is Chinese. The absence of their biggest stars in the men's final was the first blow, but the worst was yet to come in the following week at the WTT star contender. The figure of Lin Xidong, the world number 2 at the time, received harsh criticism for failing to reach the final in either tournament, losing to theoretic inferior rivals. The only Chinese joy throughout the fortnight came from Zhou Qihao, who won the men's singles title. The damage was already done. Chinese press headlined, "China is losing its dominance in the sport it does best." And the most worrying thing for them was the diagnosis. This was a predictable failure. The word predictable is the most terrifying for a system that has always thrived on the unpredictability of its championship production machine. However, Doha was not a mirage. It was the prelude to a pattern that would repeat itself in the months to come. If Doha was an earthquake, The WTT Singapore Smash in February of 2026 was a tsunami. This tournament is one of the most prestigious on the circuit, and China had always used it as a showcase of its power. In fact, in the first 6 editions of the Grand Smash, from 2022 to 2024, China had won absolute every title 30 out of 30, but in the 2026 edition, the story was radically different, and the most striking thing happened in the doubles categories. For the first time in 10 editions of this tournament, China ended the event without winning a single doubles title. A zero look at how the spoils were divided. In the mixed doubles final, Brazilians Hugo Calderano and Bruna Takahashi made history by becoming the first Grand Smash champions from the Americas, breaking the Chinese dominance in women's doubles. The Japanese pair, Miwa Harimoto and Hina Hayata, took the title, demonstrating that the alliance between the Japanese players is becoming increasingly solid. In fact, Miwa Harimoto, at just 17 years old, became the youngest champion in Grand Smash history. And in men's doubles, the blow was executed by the Lebrun brothers from France. Alexis and Felix Lebrun swept the Chinese pair of Lin Shi and Wang Yuxing in the final with a resounding 3-0 victory. This is not just a defeat. This is a defeat on 3 different fronts. At home, against rivals from 3 different continents. The technical director of the Chinese Table Tennis Association, Wang Liken, had already warned months earlier about the problem of doubles. Following the poor results in 2025, he himself pointed out that doubles were an area requiring deeper research and technical refinement. It seems the prediction came true, and the reality was even harsher than expected. So, if China is showing signs of weakness, who is knocking on the door? The answer is a diverse group of players who have gone from being aspirants to being habitual executioners. Number 1 on the threat list is, without a doubt, the Brazilian Hugo Calderano. Calderano is an atypical phenomenon. Born in Rio de Janeiro, a country where table tennis is practically invisible, he has built a playing style based on brute strength and constant aggression. His coach, Jean-René Mouney, describes him as someone who plays harder, faster, and closer than anyone else. In 2025, he had already demonstrated his power by defeating Lin Shidong in the final of the World Cup, but his most recent feat, and perhaps the most symbolic, occurred just a few days ago. In March of 2026, at the WTT Champions in Chongqing, the world number 1, Wang Chuqin, was eliminated in the quarterfinals by an 18-year-old Japan's Sora Matsushima. The news went around the world, a Japanese high school student, as the media described him, defeating the Chinese champion by 4 games to 2. Matsushima, who plays left panda, had already given a scare previously by beating Liang Jinkan at the China Smash the year before. His rise is dizzying, and speaking of Japan, we cannot ignore Tomokazu Harimoto, who remains a constant headache for the Chinese. In the WTT Finals of 2025, Harimoto defeated Lin Shidong in the semifinals. His sister Miwa is also leading the charge on the women's side, establishing herself as one of the top contenders to break Chinese dominance in Los Angeles 2020-8. In Europe. The main standard bearers are the Lebrun brothers. Felix in particular is a star. He not only won the doubles in Singapore but also defeated Lin Shidong in singles at that same tournament. Sweden also has its ace up its sleeve with Troels Morgard, who is the Olympic silver medalist in Paris 2024 and has shown that on the big stages, he does not flinch in front of the Chinese giants. And if we look at the current rankings, the evidence is overwhelming. In the world ranking for week 10 of 2026, provided by the International Table Tennis Federation, we see that in men's doubles, the Lebrun brothers are the number 1 in the world, displacing the Chinese pairs. In women's doubles, the South Korean pair of Johanna and Kim Naeon are number 1. Spapasan Wang, Monyu, and Kwai Man. And in mixed doubles, the South Korean pair Lim Jong-hoon and Shin Yubin occupy the top spot. China still has the number 1 ranked players in men's and women's singles with Wang Chuqin and Sun Yingxia, but the protective moat that once surrounded them has disappeared. Now, the ranking is sprinkled with Swedes, Japanese, French, Germans, and Brazilians in the privileged positions. Faced with this situation, China's reaction has been, to say the least, interesting. Far from trying to hide the problems, state, media, and officials have openly acknowledged the crisis. The media outlet 1063 not only reported on the defeats, but spoke of a predictable failure and that China is losing ground. The word alarm has been recurrent in the headlines, but the deepest analysis comes from the sport's own authorities. Wang Liken, the president of the Chinese Table Tennis Association, has been very clear in his diagnoses. Following the poor results of 2025, he stated that the men's team is our most pressing challenge. He emphasized that the skills and experience needed to perform well in major tournaments require further improvement. especially for the younger athletes. This is a crucial admission. For years, China relied on a smooth generational transition, but the current transition is proving to be more of a relay race with obstacles than a smooth long-distance run. Established stars like Ma Long and Fan Zhendong have begun to step away from the international circuit. Fan Zhendong, for example, even withdrew from the world rankings at the end of 2020. Frustrated with the demanding schedule and financial penalties imposed by World Table Tennis, his departure was significant. Fan Zhendong, the Olympic champion, decided to go play in the German league, an experience he himself described as a challenge to adapt to an unfamiliar environment and new playing styles. In doing so, he left a void in the national team that, for now, the young players have not been able to fill with the same solidity. Furthermore, Wang Liqin has also mentioned another structural problem: physical burnout. The world's table tennis calendar, which in 2025 exceeded 45 annual tournaments, is taking its toll. In the 2025 finals, we saw both Sun Yingxia and Wang Chuqin have to retire from their matches due to injuries, sparking a wave of criticism over the excessive workload. The Chinese Association itself had to step in too, defend the health of its players and call for a more scientific and sustainable schedule. Therefore, the problem is not just that the rivals are better, it is that the Chinese machine, which once functioned with the precision of a Swiss watch, now faces internal challenges, a transition generation that is not quite consolidating, the retirement of its natural leaders, and a schedule that is exhausting its current stars. However, this is where the narrative takes an unexpected turn, because what is a crisis for China is a dream come true for the rest of the world, and paradoxically for the long-term health of table tennis. This loss of Chinese dominance might be the best news in decades. For years, the International Table Tennis Federation has worked to globalize the sport. Steve Dainton, its CEO, has been very vocal about this. We need those magical moments where there are some surprises, and he has pointed out that Chinese dominance is a problem the sport has had to endure. Dainton himself has acknowledged that Chinese hegemony, while impressive, can be a drag on global popularity. If the outcome of a tournament is predictable, interest wanes. Therefore, the emergence of figures like Hugo Calderno, who speaks 7 languages and is a media phenomenon, or the LeBron brothers, who fill stadiums in Europe, is vital for the sport's commercialization. Even within China, there are those who view this favorably. The pressure on Chinese players to always win is an immense psychological burden. Zhang Zhihai, a researcher at the Shanghai Academy of Social Sciences, made a very interesting reflection following Fan Zhendong's experience in Germany. Fan Zhendong's journey shows that even a world number 1 with a fully developed technical system can learn vital lessons and identify invisible gaps in a foreign environment. This suggests that Chinese table tennis does not possess all the answers. Sustained leadership requires maintaining openness, diversity, and a degree of technical unpredictability. In other words, external competition is forcing China to innovate, and that innovation, in the long run, will raise the global level, making the sport more exciting. Additionally, World Table Tennis has had to implement reforms to make the circuit more attractive and less draining. Adjustments to mandatory participation, rules, and increases in prize money are some of the measures aimed at retaining stars and preventing champions like Fan Zhendong from preferring to retire early. We now arrive at the question that titles this video. As of March 2026, is China losing its dominance in table tennis? The answer, as almost always, is a matter of nuance. The answer is yes and no. Yes, it is losing dominance in relative terms. The data is irrefutable. It is no longer the overwhelming force that won every title at every tournament. Doubles, once an extension of their singles prowess, has become an evident weak point. Emerging powers have gone from being aspirants to habitual contenders. Players like Hugo Calderano, Felix Laban, Tomokazu Harimoto, and Sora Matsushima no longer arrive at finals hoping to cause an upset. They arrive believing they can win. The Chinese press has internalized this change. When a state media outlet headlines a predictable failure, it is admitting that the system no longer guarantees victory like it used to. The generation of Ma Long and Fan Zhendong is gone, and the new batch, while talented, is showing a mental fragility and lack of consistency that their predecessors did not have. But no, China's not losing its dominance in absolute terms. It remains the superpower of table tennis. It still has the world number 1 in men's and women's singles. Its talent pool remains the deepest on the planet. In major events, like the Olympic Games or the World Team Championships, it remains the undisputed favorite. Sun Yingxia herself, after winning the Mixed Team World Cup in 2025, issued a warning. As time goes on, every team will conduct deeper research into the mixed team event. We might face increasingly tough battles, but I have unshakable faith in our team's strength. That unshakable faith is what still separates China from the rest. While other countries have 1 or 2 stars, China has an army, and even if that army is showing signs of tactical disorganization in doubles, its ability to produce individual champions remains unmatched. So, in the end, what we are witnessing is not the end of the Chinese empire, but the evolution of the table tennis ecosystem. China has gone from being a monopoly to being a leader in a much more competitive market. And this competition, though painful for its fans, is revitalizing a sport that needed new heroes and new stories. The calendar leading up to the Los Angeles Olympic Games in 2028 is wide open. The inclusion of a new mixed team event in the Olympic program adds an extra layer of uncertainty. China will have to adapt to this format, and its rivals, especially Japan, Korea, and the European powers, are already working on how to exploit Chinese weaknesses in this new discipline. What is clear is that the era of automatic victory for China is over. Excitement has returned to table tennis. We no longer know who will win the next major tournament, and that is precisely what makes it worth watching. For Chinese fans, this is a test of fire. They will have to learn to live with uncertainty, with the possibility of defeat, something they have not experienced for decades. For the rest of the world, it is an opportunity. The opportunity to dream that the next great champion will not come from an academy in Beijing, but from the streets of Rio de Janeiro, from the schools of Japan, or from the clubs of France or Germany. Table tennis is in its most exciting moment in decades, and while the battle for supremacy continues, we, the spectators, are the ones who gain the most from this change. Thank you for joining me for this one analysis. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like, subscribe for more in-depth content, and share this video with those who still think table tennis is just China's game. The reality is much more interesting. But until the next video.